quite kind of a basic introduction to the concept. So I just want to have, by the end of the presentation, some questions answered as to what they are, why should we use them, and how can we do that? So before we dive into that, I kind of like you to reflect on your own experience because open educational resources may sound like a bit of a fluffy term, but you might have interacted with them more than you already know, even if you didn't really call what you're using open educational resources. So you can think of questions, for example, of have you ever created educational material for yourself and others? Have you actually published or shared the materials you created? Maybe when you were developing a course, you have reused someone else's educational material. Or have you ever taken a course that used open content? So if the answer to any of these questions is yes, you have already interacted with open educational resources, maybe even without knowing it. So then open educational resources is part of open science movement. It's part of a broader movement of open science. So open science, we generally know, is more than just kind of open access to publications. So UNESCO has defined open science as kind of an umbrella term for a variety of different practices. So these include open scientific knowledge, open science infrastructures, open societal engagement of societal actors, and open dialogue with other knowledge systems. And the most well-known facets of open science is, for example, open access to scientific publications, sharing your research data and repositories, maybe creating open source software or source code. But open educational resources are also an increasingly bigger part of open science. And this is because education and research are kind of inseparable. When you're researchers, you don't just do research in a vacuum, but you also have to share your knowledge. And the way to do this is often through education and creating educational material. And hopefully this can be understood and taught and reused by others. So that is the goal kind of with open educational resources, is to get the scientific knowledge and make it available to others to learn from. So UNESCO also has a definition for open educational resources, and they say they are learning, teaching, and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain, and this is key. So they're either in the public domain or they are under copyright that have been released under an open license, and they have to permit no cost access for reuse, repurpose, adaptation, or redistribution by others. So this means that open educational resources differ from traditional educational material in several ways. And a good way to look at this is the 5R permissions of open educational resources. So in addition, in opposition to traditional educational material that might be under traditional kind of copyright that you can't reuse, open educational resources allow you to retain the resource. So this means that you can have copies of the content to reuse it. So you can reuse the content in a variety of ways, but you can also revise it, which means that you can adopt or adapt, adjust, or modify to your liking. You can remix, so you can combine several resources into one to create something new, and you can redistribute what you've made, kind of what you've created from the previous content. And you can do all of this without having to ask permission from the original creators because there is already a license attached to the material. So a short checklist to kind of live by. So is what I'm using an open educational resource? You have to check, is the resource educational, of course? Is it digital? It has to be available online. Is it freely accessible? So no paywalls, no access restrictions. And is there a license attached? So that's what mainly sets it apart from other open textbooks, for example. So if you live by this definition, you can see that there is actually a lot of things that could count as open educational resources. So it could be lab protocols, blog posts, a tutorial on GitHub, a video on YouTube, as long as it's educational and there's a license attached to it, um, it counts as an open educational resource. So then, how can you interact with open educational resources? So this is a very simplified diagram, but I wanted to kind of split it in two parts, which is either, of course, you can develop an open educational research from scratch, or you can adopt an open educational resource that already exists. And of course, between those things, there can be reuse, relicensing, user feedback, adaptations. But today we'll go in a bit deeper into just the development side and the adoption side. So then first, developing an OER. Why would you do this? It sounds like it takes a lot of time. And people might use your work. You are maybe worried about getting credit. So what's actually the benefit for you? So first of all, it can increase your reach and impact. So when it's free to access and free to reuse, people will start reusing it. They will modify it. But the important thing with the license is that they also will cite your material. Of course, this takes time, but if you do it well, I find at least that it's not a huge effort, to be honest. Then it can also reduce duplication of effort. So instead of creating new material, you um, can encourage reuse by your users so they don't have to make the same material again when they want to teach the same thing. It can also build your professional reputation. So at the moment, OER might not be recognized so much yet in tenure or promotion systems, but this is under development in open science as well, for example, with initiatives like Koara. And then, of course, it invites collaboration and reuse. Of course, concerns remain about misuse and misrepresentation, but if you add plenty of metadata, describe your object correctly, hopefully this is minimizable. So how do you make an OER? Basically, making an OER means applying the FAIR principles that are usually applied to data sets, applying them to training materials. So you can basically just view your training material as data and verify in that sense. So that means making your OER findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So how to do this? There are some guides that have been made for this. So this is a very good, well-cited article, 10 simple rules for making training materials fair. And the rules are, number one, plan already from the start to share your material. Then two, make sure you describe your material properly. So add lots of metadata. Say, if you have a lecture, add, this lecture is supposed to be taught over 1 hour, like include the time, the target audience, all of this information. Give a unique identity. So make sure you get a persistent identifier so people can properly cite your educational material. Then register it online in a repository, for example. Define access rules. So this is very important. So this is where the licenses come in. So you can say you can reuse my material, either just add a Creative Commons license, CC BY, or another license that you want, but so people know how they can access and reuse your material. Use interoperable formats, so preferably use non-proprietary software that you don't have to pay for, so anyone that sees your material can actually reuse it. Make it reusable for trainers. So again, provide plenty of instructions for trainers on how your material is supposed to be used. Also make it usable for trainees. So make sure that it's easy to find online so people that want to use your material can find it and know what the purpose of it, like what are they going to learn from your material. So add good learning outcomes and such. Welcome contributions. So encourage people to, if they spot an error, to update it or modify it, or maybe they have another interesting topic that they want to add. And make sure also to keep the materials up to date. Okay, so these are just some tips on what you can do, what you can do today if you have any training material to verify it. This seems like a long list, but if you even just do one of these things, you've already come one step closer to verifying your training material and to creating an OER. So, for example, attach a metadata file to your training material, get a persistent identifier, deposit your training material in a repository, apply an open license. So this can be as easy as what I did, just, slapping the CC BY license on the first slide of your presentation, and then people know how they can reuse it. Use interoperable formats, provide guidance on reuse and adaptation. It's also good if you structure your materials modularly. So people, if you have a big course, people can just take the module that they want and either learn from it or reuse it. Include contributor and version info, ensure accessibility, and make the training usage visible, for example, with citations. If you want a more detailed information on how you can develop OER, there are some resources here. So from Elixir, there's the Fair Training Handbook, which is really very useful. It tells you all about how you can verify your educational material. The article 10 Simple Rules for Making Training Material Fair is kind of a shortened version of that. And these concepts, this training handbook is also taught in the course Fair Training Material Made by Design. And we at the Training Hub co-designed and are co-teaching this course. So this year it will be held in Brussels, but last year it was held in Uppsala. So perhaps it will be coming back to Sweden again, and you can take part in it. Then just some quick examples to show you what it can look like. So this is from a professor at Stockholm University who deposited his lectures with some exercises into Figshare. So here you can see you get a DOI for the training material that other people can cite. You get usage metrics, so you can see how many people viewed your material and downloaded. And here you can see there's a clear license, so people know how to reuse your material. Then another place where you can deposit your material is the Open Science Framework. So this is Gustav Nilsson from Karolinska, and he deposits all his lectures at the Open Science Framework. So you can follow what he does. You can, again, reuse his slides, which have a CC BY license in general. And he has also a metadata file here attached with a lot of information. Okay, so this was about how to develop your OER. And then, of course, on the other side, you also want people, we don't just want people developing a lot of stuff, but we also want people to actually use it and reuse it. So why would you actually reuse or reuse an OER instead of just a traditional textbook? Of course, the main benefit is that it's free. So we all know, especially in higher education, textbooks cost a lot. And with open educational material, there's no cost burden. So anyone has access to this educational material, which definitely minimizes inequality in access to education. Then there's customizable content. So you can find something, and even if it doesn't exactly suit your needs, you can adapt it to suit your needs. You also have immediate availability, of course, if it's available online and it's free to access. And it supports lifelong learning. For example, if you have you follow the course and you can recommend it to your peers and they can still access the material if it's freely available online, even though they didn't actually take the course, they can do it self-paced. So how to find quality resources to use and reuse? There are several repositories for this. So these are some general options that you have. Sorry, I went too far. So this is the OER Commons, Open Educational Resources. Then we have kind of the usual suspects, Zenodo, GitHub. There's a lot of educational material on there as well. The Open Science Framework. Then there's Merlot, which is more often used by higher education faculty to teach bachelor's or master's students. And then you also have, for example, the Open Textbook Library. That's more, again, for kind of university courses. So these suggestions that you see here have more content for short form training, for example, for in the life sciences. Then we have some life science specific repositories. So for those, you can look at Elixir, the TESS portal. The Galaxy Training Network has a lot of training, and the EMBL-EB, they have a lot of trainings as well. And at SciLifeLab now, we're setting up the training hub with the training portal. This is still under development, but we also plan to have to either link to or host open educational resources on this platform. So here's some examples. For example, in the OER Commons, you can look for just some material or for data analysis, and you'll get here just 104 results. And then you can see all the material that is available. Other peers can also rate it. So you can see if it has a high rating or not. You can immediately see under which license it is available. So could I reuse this or not once I've taken the course or looked through the material myself? Yeah, you can see some description. Then another one is on Zenodo. For example, if you look for Python data analysis, you get more than 2,000 results, all sorts of different training material. You can select here on the left panel, you can select lesson as research type, so then you know that you will get some training material. Okay. So then, of course, if you either develop or adopt an OER, one of the great strengths of the OER is that they're designed to be modified. So maybe you find a module, but you want to translate it to Swedish. That's possible. You can swap case studies if there's case studies in the material, but your students have a different background. You can adjust that, for example. You can shorten content if you have a more compressed course schedule. And the most important thing is just check the license and give proper attribution to the original creators. Then, if you need any help with any of your kind of verification of your educational material, I work for the SciLifeLab Training Hub and I can help you with that. My colleagues, we are all kind of OER specialists. So at the Training Hub, we build infrastructure for training. We provide support. So this is not just with training design, but how to design it as fair as possible. We develop training as well, and the trainings that we develop are always according to fair standards that can be reused. We are involved in international projects and Swedish projects, and we want to involve the SciLifeLab community in upskilling everyone to enable excellence. So again, if you need help with verification of training material, please contact us. And we can, with every step in the training life cycle, we can help you with making your training material fair. And with that, I would like to hand over to Anelda. So I will.
Thank you very much, Miriam and Sine, for the invitation, and Ineke for doing such a great job of laying the foundation for what I'll be sharing. When we discussed this presentation, we're talking about showing some specific examples of how open educational materials can be created from resources that exist or that are shared openly. And so I'm going to show a few case studies of projects that I've worked on over the past few years. As Miriam was saying, I'm Anelda van der Walt. I'm South African. I have a background in bioinformatics, so the work at SciLifeLab is close to my heart as well. More recently, I've been working across disciplines, and you'll see that in some of my case studies that I'll be showing as well. So Talarify, my company, is a consulting and training organization that specializes in digital and computational capacity development and open science. So I'm also quite grateful that Ineke was showing this slide, this image that was created as part of the UNESCO Open Science recommendations. I think oftentimes when people think about open science, they forget how much forms part of open science. And I'm hoping that with the presentation that I'm going to show you and the few projects that we've worked on, that you can really get a much broader sense of how your work could have impact far beyond what you have considered before. So the first case study that I want to talk to you about is a project that I did with a colleague of mine from the UK a few years ago. It was called AfriMap R, and it was about building our building blocks or developing our building blocks to make it easier to map African data. And for each of these case studies, I've displayed a bit of information about each case study. So for this project, we were working with Africans who wanted to create maps using R from their African data. And often what we have is that some of the foundational data sets that you would use to create your maps are not readily available. So we worked with colleagues from the GeoBoundaries team and also from Walt to make that data from Africa more accessible in packages that we created. But the bigger project wasn't only about training, but we also created training materials. So we created interactive hands-on tutorials. And I'll talk about two different ones. The one was called Introduction to Spatial Data in R. And we developed that in Learn R, which is a package that allows you to create interactive tutorials. And that is open source software. We also created specific small example data sets from open data sets that could be used in this tutorial so that it was small and easily accessible in these tutorials. And then we also used existing open educational resources to inform the design of these tutorials that we created. The second tutorial that we created was entry-level R maps from African data. And that was an interactive tutorial that we taught online at the Use R conference. And the whole tutorial is available on GitHub. And one of the things that you'll see as you engage with open educational materials is you don't always get it as right as what Ineke was showing, like tick all the boxes of the 5 R's. And so when I was preparing for this presentation, I realized that we never licensed the code of that tutorial. So we licensed the content, so the lessons, but we didn't license the code. So that's an omission on our side. What's also interesting about developing open educational resources is we're always pointing people to other open science artifacts and often to other open educational resources. So you'll see that, I don't know if you picked it up, but the slides that I'm showing here today are have these little paddle blocks. Everything builds on each other. And the more that you get involved in developing open educational resources, you also see how you can package different things together, the remixing that Ineke was also talking about. So as I said, these two tutorials are available on GitHub and on shiny.io. They're published under Creative Commons licenses. They were funded by the Wellcome Trust, and they're also linked off the website of AfriMapR. Even though AfriMapR is no longer funded, it's not an active project, but the resources are still available and people can still use them. The second case study is something that we did recently with the RSE Asia Association. And I'm really grateful to see Jyoti, one of my colleagues who was working closely with me on this project, is also in the audience. Thank you, Jyoti, for joining. So this was a collaboration between RSSE Africa, the research software and systems engineering community of Africa, and RSE Asia to run events where we could bring together our communities to talk about research software engineering concepts and practices and principles. And what we did was we developed the 6-part series that ran over 6 months. And you can see the names, the titles of the different sessions there. So we were looking at reproducibility, open source software, documentation, testing of research code, and also research software funding. And for each of these sessions, we invited a panel of speakers to share their experience. So although the series itself only relied, there were no slides produced in this these sessions. It was only panel discussions. But during the panel discussions, we captured information from the speakers and the audience, and we used the resources that were shared during the sessions to create what we called a resource sheet. The resource sheet was then shared on Zenodo to make sure that it's also available. Everything that was discussed in the chat and by the panelists themselves and any audience member that contributed during the session were available afterwards and were shared on Zenodo. We also recorded these sessions, except for the last one because the technology failed us there. But we recorded these sessions, they're available on YouTube. And when you are uploading to YouTube, just one thing that I would like to caution you about is there are 2 licenses on YouTube. The one is the YouTube standard license, the other one is the Creative Commons license. So if you are sharing something on YouTube, doesn't necessarily mean it's an open educational resource, even if it's online and available for free. But only if you share it under Creative Commons license your other people will be permitted to remix, download, and so on legally. So we've also shared that. And then to make the content more accessible, Ineke was also pointing to creating blogs as open educational resources. We summarized these conversations in blogs. So someone that didn't participate in the session could go to the blog to see what content was shared. Is it of interest to them? If they wanted more information, they could go to the resource sheet where we share very specific links to very specific resources, including open educational resources, open source software, open infrastructure, open communities, open access publications, and various infographics, images, and diagrams. And then they could also watch the video if they wanted further information. The third case study is something that we did very recently, and this was a series of workshops that we created for the Diplomics Omics community. And it was really targeted at people who are quite new to open science. We developed 3 workshops. The first one was an introduction to open science, which is very, very generic. But we tailored it to the South African audience. So we included information that is generally not available in open science content that are available online at the moment. There's very, very little content that has information about African specific policies and resources, communities, and so on. So that was the first workshop. The second workshop was omics, open science for people working in a wet lab. And the third workshop was open science practices for computational omics researchers. And we had some practicals along with a theory. This whole series was supported by a workbook which we created and which is available on Zenodo. Again, we're using open infrastructure to share an open educational resource that was created using open access publications, infographics, images, and diagrams that's been shared under open licenses. We're pointing to open communities, and we're always pointing people also to open source software that they can use in their own work. Some of the resources that we used in the development of this resource was the UNESCO Open Science recommendations. We used some open access publications as case studies to show how open science how open science practices are made visible when you publish a paper, because you can then see where's the data, where's the code, is the publication under open access, the protocols for your research. And so you can determine quite a lot about a laboratory's open science practices by reading a paper that they've written. And then again, we've used Zenodo as an open infrastructure to share this resource. And videos are available on YouTube. All of this is again licensed under Creative Commons with attribution. And I noticed that some of the resources that Ineke was showing had Creative Commons with attribution, no non-commercial, not to be used for commercial purposes. And there are also open educational resources that are published under the non-derivative. But please remember that when you are creating an open educational resource, one of the 5 R's are to be able to remix. So if you are publishing under a license that is restrictive in terms of not allowing derivatives to be made of something, that isn't strictly an open educational resource, even though it's online, even though it's for free. So this work was funded through Diplomix, which is an open omics platform in South Africa that is doing some phenomenal work. And I really hope that we can still bring SciLifeLab and Diplomix together to collaborate sometime. And that was funded by the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation in South Africa. So when we were discussing this session, we were talking about, or Ineke asked, and I think Miriam asked, what makes something more usable to be added to an open educational resource? So if you, as researchers in the audience, are putting out your research artifacts, it can be different things. It can be infographics in publications. It can be your publication, the publications itself. It can be the slides of your lectures. It can be the way of running meetups. It can be so many things. But if you are putting that out there, what makes it accessible and usable to a person that you don't know? That's maybe not in your lab. That's maybe sitting on the other side of the world. And some of the resources that we've found very usable in the work that we do are, first of all, we have to know about it. And knowing about it takes so many different forms. It means hearing about it on social media, hearing about it through communities of practice, hearing about it through presentations at conferences. So don't be shy to talk about all the different things that you do, because someone somewhere is going to hear about something that you've done that might be exactly what they're looking for to take them to the next step or unlock a way of knowledge sharing in their context that they've been looking for. Yeah, you just never know where your knowledge and your hard work might end up making a difference. So don't be shy to talk about your work, all aspects of it, not only the purely academic. Then ensure that it's available online. Um, I must say, I I've it's quite difficult to go through Zenodo and look at training material that is there. So normally I would hear about something from someone or through the grapevine, through social media, through someone I trust or one of my communities of practice. And then I will go to the online platform where it's shared or the website or the repository to find that specific resource. And if it is available in one of these quite well-known, more established repository type platforms where it can be downloaded, the license is visible, the citation is visible, then that really, really helps to make it more usable. Also, if it is available in a format that can be repurposed, so for example, if you've got an image that is shared as an SVG or a PNG with this transparent background so that you can use it in different contexts. There's a few things that just makes it so much more usable. And then if people know about it and it's available online, if I can't find the license, I can't use it. So the licensing, just making sure that the licensing is very visible and very unambiguous makes it also much, much, much easier to reuse. Um, and then lastly, which I didn't put here, but afterwards I was thinking about it, if there is contact details of the person that created it, I found often that if I reach out to someone who's created a resource and I tell them, thanks for creating this, we reusing it like in this way in something that we've created, it creates new opportunities for collaboration. And also there's a bit of a feel-good factor of just knowing that you created this resource for a specific purpose, and on the other side of the world, someone is using it for a different purpose to make a difference. Um, so contact details, not necessarily that you will be spammed, but sometimes it's nice to strike up a conversation with someone who is reusing your resources. So thank you very much for your time. Again, thank you to SciLifeLab for the invitation to share some of our projects and just show how we've been creating and reusing OERs. I'm happy to take any questions.